I remember my agents called and they said, hey, do you want to do a vampire movie? And I said, no. Because I thought it was like, at the time, they had like a slew of like bad vampire movies. Because it always goes cyclical, right? So there was like Interview with a Vampire was a great movie, and then all of a sudden they beat it to death, and there was at that time, there was a bunch of like D-list vampire movies where with a bunch of kids hanging out in caves, and like it was like slasher movies, So that's where my mind went, and then they said no, it's based on a book, and Catherine Hardwicke's directing it, and I said, oh well, I like Catherine. I mean, I like her movies. I said, when's the? Because I thought maybe she knew something I didn't, I said, when's the audition? And they said, it's tomorrow. I said, okay, well, do you have a script? They said, no. I said, well, it's based on a book, right? They said, yeah. I said, so I went and got the book, and then I brought it home, and I was just like, all right, skip to Carlisle, because I don't have a lot of time here. And then, oh, Carlisle, okay, here he is on page 40. And then I was like, oh, ooh, the most handsome movie star looks, I like that. How are they going to get me to look like that? I don't know. And then I started reading it, and I liked it so much that I actually went back to page 1, and I read it all the way through. And then I went to the audition, I had bloodshot eyes, and they were like, you're perfect. So that's how I got to it.
That was the secret, and the rest is history.
Lack of sleep.
I love that.
From you the last time you told me.
All right, she wants to know. Do you want to know the real story of what happened? Because that she just out. So the real story is I didn't get the part. That's a true story. It's true. I read for the role, and I did have bloodshot eyes. And I went in and I read, and I thought I did a good job. And I had so much fun with Catherine, and she gets in there with you, like she reads with you. So like at one point, like I'm playing Carlisle and she's Bella, and I have like my hands on the director's thigh, and I'm like, if this is gonna look weird if somebody walks in the door. And then I said, to my agents the next day, I said, hey, how did it go? And they said, well, you're on a list. And in Hollywood, that means it could be a list of 50, a list of 5, a list of 2. Nobody knows what this list means. And then I call every like couple of days, so any news? Oh, you're still on the list. And then finally I got a call about 2 weeks later, and I said, any word? And they said, yeah, you didn't get it. And I was so bummed. I was like, man, I really thought I did it well, well in the audition. And so for a couple of days I was kind of bummed. And then I went to another audition. And in the lobby, sometimes you gotta wait to get in the door, there was a book on the table. And the book was a book that said 100 Years of Vampire Films. And in the book there was like Bela Lugosi and Interview with a Vampire, and it was like this really cool book with vampire movies from like the 1900s till present day. And I sat there in the lobby looking at this book going, well, thank you, universe, God, for rubbing it in that I didn't get this movie. But I liked the book so much that I copied the name down, and I sent it to Catherine, because I thought, well, maybe there'll be another second movie or a third movie. Maybe I could be in that one, and I'll just wish her well. And I inscribed it. Catherine, had a great time in the audition with you. I hope that you make one of the 100 years of great vampire movies, and it makes it in this book one day. And that's it. I left it alone because it was a kind gesture. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a call that the actor that they actually cast, because they wanted to go a little older with that role, they said he either his deal didn't work out or he passed on it. And they said to Catherine, who do you want to go to next? And she had just gotten my book that day. So I got jumped to the top of that list. And she said, well, what about Peter Facinelli? And they said, oh, that's great, sounds great to me. So I always joke that I bought my role for $29.99, and that's how I got Twilight. So there you go.
We love that.